Good morning. Welcome to Real Talks, Dominate Real Estate. It's September 2020, and I'm Charlie Bengel.
And I'm Eyerusalem Meaza. Grab a cup of coffee and let's make your real estate career better.
Last day of the fourth quarter. Tomorrow, Eyerusalem's in the day.
All right. Well, happy hump day. In this morning headlines, the stress of a commute was a real lot for Americans before the COVID-19 pandemic. In a recent survey, about 20% of 8,500 workers said that they had a daily commute of more than 3 hours. 37% had a commute of 1 to 2 hours, according to the survey conducted by FlexJobs, a remote work resource. Because stay-at-home orders spurred by the pandemic have kept many office workers away from their desks, these lengthy commutes have largely subsided. That has caused more homeowners to reevaluate their priorities for a good home because their proximity to the office has come to matter much less. Now they're weighing, is there enough room for home office? Does everyone in the family have enough space? Is there a different location to move to where everyone could be happier or where it's more affordable? Not having to commute was the number one benefit cited by respondents to FlexJobs survey, even ahead of improved work-life balance. Workers say that they want flexible work options to stick around after the pandemic as well. Further, 27% of survey respondents say that remote work has prompted them to consider moving. As more companies decide to extend remote work opportunities in the coming months, and as more people realize they're not tied down to their locale for their jobs, the residential real estate market is likely to continue to shift. Consumers may find certain areas may be more conducive to remote work. The National Association of Realtors recently assigned work from home scores to 3,142 counties in the U.S. based on affordability. In other news, sales of newly built single-family homes in August reached their fastest pace since September 2006, the Commerce Department reported Thursday. They also attained another landmark, topping 1 million sales to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 1.01 million units. That marks a 43% jump when compared to last year. But inventory levels of both existing and new homes may be preventing sales from stretching even higher. Housing inventories of existing homes is down 18.6% compared to a year ago. New home sales fell to a 3.3-month supply in August. Higher lumber costs and the limited availability of building materials in some markets is leading to higher prices in new home construction. Lumber prices are now more than 170% since mid-April, adding more than $16,000 to the price of a typical new single-family home, according to the NAHB. The median price of a new home in August was $312,800. New home sales were up on an annual basis in all 4 major regions of the U.S. The Northeast and the Midwest each posted a 23.6% increase in August. The South saw sales rise 13.9%, and the West posted a 12.4% gain. In other news, this year has been a roller coaster for every industry, with global economies expecting to shrink significantly throughout the end of the year. It's the best time to take stock of what real estate can expect as the year closes. By figuring out what will happen and taking expert investors' opinions into account, real estate agents can seize opportunities they might not have seen themselves. Within a year this dire, what can we expect for the latter half of 2020? We asked 15 entrepreneurs from Forbes Real Estate Council their opinions on the current state of the market and what to expect to see in the closing half of this year. Here's what they told us. Number 1, demand for housing will remain robust as millennial and baby boomers power through to keep the economy moving. Existing home sales will return closer to levels seen in the second half of 2019. Number 3, we'll likely see the flood of new refinance demand continue while ongoing COVID-19 fears will force mortgage originators to shift most of their process to being fully digital. Number 4, there will be a substantial increase in foreclosures, short sales, and bank-owned properties. This will happen toward the end of the year and the beginning of next year as banks start foreclosing on delinquent mortgages. Number 5, the ability to work remotely will weigh heavily in home buying decisions over the next 6 months. Number 6, COVID-19 is speeding up the mass adoption of technology in order to limit human interaction. Number 7, virtual tours are here to stay, although there's clearly a shift in consumer behavior toward a more digital home buying experience. The human element remains a critical piece. Number 8, they expect capital reallocation between real estate classes and a surge of capital deployment for multifamily and industrial assets. Number 9, there will be more preferred equity fund offerings. Number 10, Class B multifamily properties will remain solid with stable cap rates as occupancy and around 95% of rent collections nationwide remained high during COVID-19. Number 11, the end of 2020 will likely see certain sellers willing to accept a lower price for their assets. Number 12, that was number 11. Number 12, commercial real estate may see a slowdown. Number 13, warehousing markets will continue to grow. Number 14, growing interest in suburban or rural living. And number 15, there will be more interest in properties with fitness amenities. Charlie, what's going on with rates?
Thanks, Eyerusalem. Rates remain unchanged. The 30-year fixed rate is percent. The jumbo is at 2 7/8. FHA and VA are at 2 3/4. These are purchase rates in the metropolitan market brought to us by PNC. Talk about the market.
In the last week in Hampton Roads, we saw 703 new listings hit the market, 777 properties go pending, and 738 properties sold. In the last week in Washington metro area, within 30 miles of the White House, we saw 1,550 new listings hit the market, 1,634 go pending, and 1,419 homes sold. Back over to Charlie with our special guest.
Thanks, Eyerusalem. I'd like to welcome back to the show Coach Amy Lassen. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning.
It is always good to see you. Today, we're going to be talking about maximizing your value and educating the seller. And before we start that, I was reminding Eyerusalem a few minutes ago that today's the last day of the third quarter. The fourth quarter begins tomorrow, and what a year it's been, right? I kind of divide this year into two, pre-COVID and COVID. There are trips that I took in January and February that feel like they were in a different year.
Oh, totally for me. Yeah.
I mean, there's places that I visited over the weekend, and my friend was like, yeah, we were here in January. And I'm like, no, we weren't. That was last year. And he's like pulling up photos from his phone. So anyway, I digress. It's been a very strange year. I hope everybody out there is staying healthy. Where do you want to start with our topic of the day, which again is maximizing your value and educating the seller?
Well, I would love for you to clarify, because for me, educating the seller is vital for every possible reason. And it's not necessarily, in my perception, about maximizing value so much as making sure that things go extremely well. So to explain maximizing value.
So I think that this comes right down to the listing presentation, right? And setting expectations with the seller. And I believe by doing that, you're maximizing your value and creating a transaction with less friction, if you will.
Yes, right. Well, okay. I think most of us definitely do not what you just said. We don't do a thorough enough job of setting expectations. And you've said so many times on the show, conflict arises when expectations differ, you know?
Sure.
And I had a coaching call, actually it was on my mastermind, that I had an agent ask, how can we handle inspection better with our own seller? Like, here it comes, here's the inspection. Now I'm butting heads with my own client. And we went back through, okay, how did you discuss this in advance? So here's what I want to say. And Charlie, you decide how granular we get. Like, are we going to walk them through, you know, the listing presentation checklist style? So how many things do I need to cover before I put a sign in the yard? All the things. Right. to be super thorough. And then people who say, well, they don't have time for that. Or I had a coaching client week after week. Her issue was sellers would bully her into doing things their way. Or, we had to go on the market in 3 days. I just didn't get to do my process. I said, why? Why did you have to go on the market in 3 days? Well, that's what the seller expected. I'm like, why did the seller expect that? Right? Seriously, who made that rule? And when people say, I'm in a hurry, it's rare that they really do have this 48-hour pants on fire, gotta sell it, right? That's super rare. So I think it's up to us to figure out what our standard is and to be really confident about sharing it, right? So, it's kind of the Tom Ferry karate chop. Here's what I know, right? So be prepared to just really, really own the situation and explain your process. They're hiring you to do a job. If they have to boss you around and tell you how to do it, they're also going to be insecure that you don't know what you're doing, I think.
Well, and yeah, I think that it's up to the agent to, to set the tone. And if somebody speeds things along, educate the seller and why that may not be appropriate in this case, and then they can always decide, right?
Sure.
If they're in a special circumstance or whatever, fine. But so we were using the
outlier. It's an outlier. That's a special circumstance.
Agreed.
I think most agents are going to say, you don't understand. Let me explain this one outlier like it's the rule. You've got to have your own rule that carries 90% of the time.
Right. And
confidence
I think
practice will get you there.
Well, yeah, no, it's funny you say that because I was just going to mention confidence. And the last mastermind that I did, we were talking a lot about confidence and the importance of confidence. And I think walking in with the confidence and a system gives a seller comfort.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
For the agent out there that says, I don't want to go, when do I go over, for an example, running the example that you and I were talking about a second ago, which is the home inspection, when would you talk about the expectations around the home inspection? Is that during the listing presentation or is that before the home inspection?
I would do it 3 times. I would do it at the listing presentation. I would do it when the contract comes in and they agree to sign the purchase contract. And then I would do it the week of inspection. And of course, it's not a complete repetition of the entire section, but you got to remind them, right? So as inspection as an example, and you may say, no, that's too much information. Okay, it's time for us to figure out a way to deliver the information they need to hear, right? So Charlie, you and I have talked about how fortunate RE/MAX Allegiance agents are that they have a beautiful pre-listing communication that they can send. So send your bragging on yourself, chest pounding piece well in advance of your appointment, right?
Right.
Get the I'm awesome out of the way. Then when you're with them, whether it's on Zoom or in person, you definitely walk through the current market statistics, you walk through the comps, you walk through the very targeted marketing plan for their property. You also walk them through the home selling process. You don't assume that they know, and you don't say, but Amy, they've sold houses before. Well, they haven't sold them with you. Yes, they did. They sold a house with me 5 years ago. Okay, fine. Still, remind them, right? Are you an experienced agent because you listed and sold a house once? I'm the best agent in this town. I sold a house once. Right. No, it takes a long time to learn this skill, okay? So them having sold a house, even with you, once 5 years ago is not enough. So you walk them through the process. And boy, has COVID changed it. And not just COVID. COVID has changed things. The pace of the market has changed things. And those are actually separate. So I walk them through the marketing vision. I walk them through the current pace of the market. Then I walk them through how this is going to go. Here's how showings are handled. This is how it's going to be. Look, and you show them. And then this is how inspection will be handled. This is what might come up with appraisal. This is what we'll do if we have multiple offers. They may look like this. We may have this to consider. This is how we're going to handle it. I'm going to put it all on a spreadsheet and I'm going to show you your options. We may get some love letters. I'm not going to show you love letters and let me explain why or whatever, right? You tell them this is how this gets handled. I was so fortunate, this most recent listing that I just closed, that we had the talk about what if it doesn't appraise. And I didn't honestly think that it wouldn't. I didn't,
Okay.
because it's not that often.
Mm-hmm.
Agents love to talk about what if it doesn't appraise. And it usually does, right? A little bit of a drama queen. But what if, and I brought it up, and it didn't. Knife in the heart. It was so disappointing. But she handled it really, really well. We'd gotten $24,000 over my already escalated price, and we didn't get it. We got halfway between my pretty high asking price and the contract price. We got halfway. And she was pretty peaceful about it. She'd had the exact same thing happen on the place she was purchasing in Florida, and she got it. But we had talked about it well in advance. So that's what I would say right then and there. But part of that is with the example of inspection, show, don't tell. When you say, well, there's going to be inspection, there's going to be a lot, you got to think about it. All the talking isn't as persuasive as show them a copy of an inspection report. Say, these things are 28 pages. Look, let me show you. Gosh, this is the electrical section alone. Dear heavens, look how much is here, right? And you can show them the picture. This is a 5-year-old home, right? This is a beautiful, good condition home. And look at the laundry list of things they asked for, or whatever, or things that showed up on the report. You just start setting an expectation, because in this case, she was in a pretty high-end market, but she was also working in the suburbs, and she had a $350,000 seller who was just crossing his arms on his chest and refusing to repair anything. And it was a little too late to back up and educate him about, would you rather put it back on the market over $400? Would you?
Right.
So that's what I would say.
I like that. I've got some coaching clients are making videos of each step of the transaction, and they are then sending those videos ahead of time. So home inspection time for the seller, you're sending them a video reminding them, this is not the first time that the topics come up, as you mentioned, but you're reminding them to expect during the home inspection, in 2 days or whatever. And you can turn that into a YouTube series that other people can come and find and think, wow, this agent really has their game, right? Has their game.
I love that. And I have, educated and encouraged that for quite a few years. And it's interesting. I have one particular client who has done it faithfully, and he's super knowledgeable. I tease him because he's not good at self-promotion. And I call him, he's in my market. I call him when I have questions about real estate. I call my sister with contract questions. I call him about the actual properties, because man, does he know his stuff. And so I've teased him. I'm like, dude, you're hiding your light under a bushel. Create videos, right? So he finally pushed back on me. He said, I've been doing it. I've been faithful. He said, guess what? They don't watch them. I send them via BombBomb, and I track. They don't watch them.
Interesting.
And I thought, let's think about this, because in this age of overwhelm, right? There's so much stuff in your Facebook feed. There's so much stuff in your inbox. We're overwhelmed with stuff all the time.
Yep.
Yes, do it, and yes, put it on your YouTube channel, but don't assume, hey, I sent them the one video. Wasn't that enough? Have the conversation. I would definitely have a checklist, tell them what you're going to cover it, go through it. That's another thing about setting expectations. When you have the listing presentation, tell them, we're going to take an hour to go through the vision that we're going to craft together, the strategy for getting your home sold the way you want it to be done. Don't let them be shocked that you have more to cover after 15 minutes.
So the agent that says it takes me an hour to go through my marketing, the pricing, and my commission, do I then schedule another appointment to go through the process? Do I do it there? How do you do it?
That's a really cool idea, Charlie, that I actually hadn't thought of until you just now said it. Like, I think most of us are terrified of a two-step right now because we may lose the listing.
Oh, agreed.
Right?
I don't think the second step takes place unless you have the listing.
Right. I never thought of that until you said it. And now I'm thinking, this is golden, right? You get it signed, and then you say the next step is it's sort of our launch meeting. I love this idea so much. I can't believe it just happened live.
A launch meeting. I like that. Yeah, that's good.
Next we have our launch meeting, and you walk it, because now they've got a little bit more brain space to handle it.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm writing that down.
Right. No, that's good. Okay. Other thoughts on ways to maximize our value and educate our sellers we're not, and we knew this topic, but we weren't sure how we were going to talk about the topic, right? And so we didn't get super granular today, but I do think that it starts with having a protocol, a system, a checklist, right?
100%.
And, again, I think, that brings your confidence. The checklist is going to bring the seller comfort.
Yep.
Now, this real estate agent really knows what she's doing, right? Because she's got a whole system for this thing, right? And
Sure.
The launch meeting, we're going to go over all this stuff. It's going to be great. You're always going to, I'm always going to know what's next and to expect next. I think to be able to look somebody in the eye and tell them that is powerful, because most agents, they don't even bring it up, much less talk about it, right? It's not even mentioned.
Right. Well, maybe we're being a little bouncy in this show because you and I have covered this topic so many times. And so we feel like we don't necessarily need to repeat ourselves, but let's repeat ourselves. You absolutely have to follow a standard protocol, right? You have an initial interview conversation that follows a form, right? You don't guess what you need to ask when they call you or you call them and you're saying, really, you're thinking of selling your house? Really? Next month? Wow. Right. So what do you ask next? Follow the form. It's on the allegianceway.com, right? So make sure you follow a standard seller intake form or whatever you want to call it, right? It's that initial seller interview. Then you send the pre-listing communication, whether it's a video, an email, some sort of attached presentation like RE/MAX Allegiance has. And then you send the Google form that asks, how old is your furnace? And right. So absolutely step by step. And then you educate them about what to expect on the appointment, whether it's Zoom or in person. And I highly recommend Zoom, by the way. If those of you who are in areas, jurisdictions, or states, or maybe just with your own comfort level that being in person is fine with you, Zoom is a really wonderful way to do presentations. It's a really wonderful way to keep eyeballs on content. I have a coaching client who he says he'll never give it back. He's just become such a fan of the Zoom presentation. It really, really saves a lot of time and helps him keep eyeballs on the content. So I recommend it. But either way, make sure they understand. And I would probably say if I was going to be, I think it's hard to be on Zoom for an hour and a half. So I think hour is fine. If you're going to be in person, definitely an hour and a half, because you got to walk through the property too. But Charlie, what if you were doing true distancing? What if you were listing this somewhat at distance and part of this Zoom meeting is them walking you through the house with their phone? Oh, back at the beginning of COVID, that was a thing.
Yep. So
you think about that timing.
So I've been thinking recently, and I've been talking to some coaching clients about this, especially those that still want to do the two-step. Right. I want to go and I want to look at the house first. And I'm like, be careful, because if you're competing, someone else is going to swoop in and they're going to get it on the first step. I said, if the MLS and your questions to the seller do not paint a good enough picture of the house for you to feel comfortable about pricing it, then why don't you get on Zoom or FaceTime with them and have them do a walkthrough and just say, this is what we're doing in COVID times. That way we're limiting our face-to-face time together. And the agent's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So a quick walkthrough, that way you have an idea of, that kitchen really is a dump, or wow, it's gorgeous. They really did just, redo it, during COVID or whatever. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then, you're confident. Again, if you don't know what to expect, you're not going to be. And really, nothing, I think, cuts confidence off at the knees is not important. Walking in and realizing that the picture you had of the house is totally not the reality. Yeah. And that's often because we didn't ask the right questions.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So I think you're making a couple of super great points. The pace of this market is such that homes are selling quickly. And so you need to be prepared to pounce, right? And I'm not saying rush your schedule or shortcut your process, but be in a hurry to be in communication with the seller, and be proactive about price. I never recommend buying listings by making up numbers that they can never get, right?
Right.
Whatever the last agent is, I promise 20,000 higher. Heavens no. But for those of you who are maybe losing out on price, be as educated as possible about what really is possible. Because sometimes those of us who try to be eminently fair and conservative, we're shooting ourselves in the foot when someone else comes and says, no, I can get you the moon and the stars. And then they do. And you're
Right.
like, oh, how did I not see that coming? So really, really be strong, be well prepared. That's a heck of a way to create confidence. Be well prepared for the appointment. I was thrilled to hear a high-end luxury agent talk about his process and how he spends easily 4 hours just preparing the presentation that he's going to do. And that's for high-end. But don't shortcut. Think about how much you're about to earn and how much time this is worth. And if you lose out, if you spend a crazy number of hours preparing for this listing and somehow you lose out to another agent, pat yourself on the back for sharpening your saw and being that much closer to dominating in your own market. So I think preparation will take you really, really far. But we were supposed to talk today about educating the seller. So Charlie, let's talk about all the other things that you could set better expectations about. Because what are the things that cause pain, or worse, pain and it blows up? Or worse, pain, it blows up and they don't work with you going forward.
Right.
I think a lot of us are used to painful transactions and we pride ourselves on being good firefighters. Oh man, I saved that one. Saved it again. Rush of adrenaline, right? And the thing I tease the agents that I train about is you're the pyro, right? You're the idiot who started that fire, right? We could all do a way better job of managing the thing so that it doesn't blow up. Right. I had one reason. So here's how you do it. I'll tell you, here's another thing. Always be adding to your checklist. Always be adding to your checklist. I showed up to a closing last week. This is the buyer though. Sorry. I'm going to finish the story, but it's a buyer story.
Okay.
The buyer had moved from another state and discovered that he couldn't get a cashier's check, had to have the funds wired, and couldn't get the funds wired because he had to be in person in Arizona. I'm in Colorado. Like they wouldn't let him send a wire without signing in person. I'm like,
oh my gosh.
How did I not ask? Do you know where your money is? And do you know how to get at it? Right?
Yep.
That went on my checklist.
Yeah.
So I think for sellers, boy, when new stuff comes up, don't say, wow, that was a one-off. Add it to your process, right? So Charlie, besides inspection, which can really be a big bugaboo, what would you say are other things that we could set better expectations around?
Appraisal. You
Yes.
alluded to that earlier today.
Yes.
Pricing. I think if we're going to price, the seller needs to know that could be, fraught with issues.
Yep. I can't tell if we've lost Charlie from my end. He's
the buyer's loan, right? Checklist.
Say that again. You were frozen for a second.
I'm back.
Okay, say that again.
The buyer's mortgage, right?
Yeah.
Getting done on time, right? So we need to be in touch with the other agent to make sure that they are on track. We need to be in touch with the lender to make sure that they're on track. And that's something that a lot of agents used to be pretty lazy about. And if we're going to add anything to our checklist today, it needs to be in touch with the title company, the mortgage company, right? Because a lot of these appraisers are running behind and it's causing delays.
Yep. So maybe, Charlie, with 2 minutes left and you kind of breaking up, maybe I'll be bossy and take over the time. Because
yes,
I think,
please do. Thank you.
So I think you're right. I think you're right about appraisal. So make sure you explain what are the possibilities that could happen with appraisal. You explain even, selling to a VA or an FHA borrower, if you've got a seller who says, I don't want to make any repairs, if these are repairs that will hold up those types of loans, the seller needs to understand that, right? Just say, I hear you. We're pricing it accordingly, whatever that might be. Pad your net sheet. When you have a listing presentation, do a net sheet, show them every possible fee that could be on there. I pad mine with the possibility of paying for a home warranty, even though in this market that's kind of ridiculous. The seller really doesn't have to do that. But I say, here's a possibility. You could pay for a home warranty. And then I pad it with, say, $1,500 in repairs. And in Colorado, I say, your chances of having your radon come back from a test easily elevated is about 50%. So look, there's 900 right there. So I let them have an expectation that a certain amount of money will be going out the door. You dang it. I was on a roll and I forgot the other thing. So make sure that they have an expectation of just that would be a possibility, and then talk to them about how they would feel. Because waiting till they're already bent out of shape because something was wrong with the electrical panel or whatever. Well, I never had a problem with it. To have that conversation well in advance. The buyer is making an offer based on what they can see. And when the inspection comes back, there may be things that they didn't know.
Mhm.
And they may ask for things just because they want to, or because they desperately have to because of their loan, or because they wouldn't be able to afford to move forward if you didn't make the repair for them, and walk them through all the scenarios so that it's not this simple yes, no, right? So I think, and not all sellers are stubborn, by the way, in case I'm being unflattering. Some sellers are stubborn, but I'd say most sellers are stubborn when they don't understand. And so do the best that you can to educate. I had one recently. His wife warned me. He's a super literal person and he just cannot be caught off guard. And we talked and he just said, I will not make repairs. And I thought, you're kidding, right? He hadn't maintained this house in 22
Mhm.
years he lived there and the thing was falling down around him. I did the best that I could to educate him and I just prayed. But the thing that ended up happening was I talked, even though he said no every single time we discussed it, when it finally came time, it's like he was a little bit more prepared and he was very reasonable then. Not
Good.
that everyone would be, but that's what I would say. Follow a standard checklist. We have checklists for you. Do a download on the allegianceway.com. Always follow a process. Always make it better over time. Don't assume the seller knows. Tell them. And then besides just telling, do the coaching style, ask questions and let them self-discover. Let them tell you what concerns they have about an inspection or whatever that might be.
I like it. This was a great show today. Listing or the launch meeting, I think, is one of our takeaways, right? That we want to add into our checklists and systems. Amy, always good to see you. Thanks for being on the show today. Have a great day. Back over to Eyerusalem.
Thank you so much for watching and hope that you have a wonderful day. And as always, we are here to make your career better.
Take care.